Call the meeting to order. Would you do a roll call, please?
Belsley.
Here.
Dobb.
Here.
Hare. Herman.
Here.
Kaufman.
Here.
Newhouse.
Here. You have the floor.
Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a public hearing today. I will turn the meeting over to the administrator.
So tonight I will be asking your approval on the appropriations, and that was included in your packet. There are several items that have changed, as they always do every year whenever we go through this, between the time that we do the budget in April and then we bring it forward. There's always expenses that we kind of zero in on by the time we get to this point in the year, and some things decrease. One of the things that decreased was the IT services. So we had budgeted a higher amount. The contract came in, it was lower, so I went back through and pulled that out of the appropriations. A few of the things that increased, in fiscal year 14, we had budgeted office furniture, which is fairly inexpensive for Village Hall, replacing our conference room table, but the bills didn't come through and it didn't all get ordered until this year. So I added it to this year's, just because we didn't get it in last year's. I did increase the land and administration, and there's actually a typo, and I apologize for this. So the land, it's 13.8100. That actually increased from $395,000 to 495,000, and that's because we have to purchase or acquire a land for the Detroit Avenue expansion. So then that means in buildings, we should actually go from 0 to 100,000. And that's to allow the board to purchase a building if an opportunity presents itself in fiscal year 15. And Trustee Kaufman asked that I put that on. Then there's interfund transfers, and these are just things that we do mainly for the capital projects. If some of the expense didn't come through in fiscal year 14, I have to add it to fiscal year 15, which is what the majority of the things that came through for the interfund transfers. And then we also were a little bit over an overlay than what we actually had budgeted, so I increased that by $15,000. The rest of it is just going through those IT costs, basically deducting it from each department a little bit. Then we get to street, and if you guys remember, there was a building that was demolished during the tornado, one of our storage buildings. So I added $50,000 to the building's line item for street so that we could replace that building. That is where we store our snow plows and our mowers. So we just kind of vary those depending on what the weather is doing. Let's see. Then the business district fund, which they will bring this to the board to ask, but I wanted to include it. They wanted to do a filming of the facade grant informational session that people could go on the village website and reference. We would expect it to not be overly expensive. I put $250 for that. And then we also did a plat, I apologize, and so I put that in there for the professional services. I was also asked to add $10,000 to resurface a downtown parking lot. I think there was a building on it and it's been knocked down, so they want to resurface it so it's an easier place to park. So I added that. And then some of our capital projects, fiscal year 14 projects that were billed in fiscal year 15. So what happens is we're on a cash basis, so these come through. We basically recognize expense whenever the cash is spent. So due to the fact that the cash was spent in this fiscal year, I needed to add them. So it was the West Queenwood lift station. We have $76,000 that's coming through this year. The village's portion of the bus barn, basically the parking lot and all of that, that was $62,000, and that's coming through this year. It took a little longer to finish these up, I think, due to the weather. And then we had 30,000 for the overlay bid. So 15,000 of that you would have seen in general fund, and 15,000 of that you'd see in stormwater. And then the stormwater depreciation, water depreciation fund, that's just recognizing those costs that I have to now transfer yet again to the capital projects fund. In the gas fund, there is some training. We have hired a new employee, and he will be doing pipeline welder training. This is a very specialized training that we will be sending him to. If we don't have an employee that can do this, we have to contract this out over and over again, and we're kind of, I believe, Director of Public Works Loudermilk would say, you know, we're at their mercy. We have to figure out when they can do it, whereas if it's our employee, we can control it a little bit more. And so he will be going to, Craig, where is he going? To Ohio? Ohio, right? He'll be going to Ohio for training, and I think it's a 10-week program. So it's an intensive training. And the other is that we increase the distribution and collection system in gas because of the Detroit Avenue gas relocation we will have to do this year. And basically from there, I'm trying to think, then we get down into the water treatment department, and we have some costs that Director of Public Works Loudermilk mentioned last month, or last meeting. So we have some laboratory upgrades, so that will be increasing about $5,000 for our maintenance supplies, and then equipment was at $60,000 that Craig had mentioned. So that was for the plant upgrades and the new chemical feed process. So overall, those are kind of the changes. They affect several departments, but those are all that we have at this point.
Any comments from any of the trustees? Any questions? I'd like to ask a question. If I noticed one of the items was to put some money aside in case we need to do something. Is that necessary? I mean, how tough is it if this whole Board of Trustees decided they wanted to do something outside the appropriations? How hard would it be for them to say we need another $100,000?
My understanding is that once you've done the appropriations, and McGrath can support me or tell me if I'm wrong, is that you have to have another revenue source if you want to create another expense, or you have to deduct it from somewhere else. You know, kind of like we did, we decided that we needed the truck for the fire department. So what we did is we reduced the expense from another account and added it to that vehicle fund. So those are the ways I think that you can do it. I think those are the only two ways. So we wanted to ensure that if something was to come up, we could do it without it becoming a problem. We were a little bit tighter on our budget this year, so I don't know that there would be necessarily the extra $100,000 there if you guys decided to do something. So my suggestion was, let's add it now, me knowing that we might not spend it, but I just don't want to get into that point where everybody's trying to figure out how do we do this now.
Would it have to be spent on a building, or could it be spent on anything?
If the board votes to move the money to something else, they could do that within that same department.
So in effect, we've just said, let's put in an extra $100,000 just to have it in case?
Correct.
Just wanted to understand.
And that would be true to confirm what Wendy said in terms of how to move stuff around. You can either do a line item transfer by pulling from one line item and changing to a different line item. That applies all the time as long as you stay within the same fund. Or you can do a supplemental budget and appropriation ordinance if you have a new revenue source. And the ability to move, so I mean, even with this money out, you could still move $100,000 if you had it somewhere. But you have to have the appropriation to spend it. So if it's not there now and you decide to spend it later, you would have to do a line item transfer absent new revenue. So she is correct.
Any questions from the trustees? Comments? Let's have a motion.
So moved. Approval?
Second.
Second by trustee Dodd.
Okay. Are we approving the ordinance then down under her part? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, the annual appropriations ordinance.
Okay.
I would suggest that maybe in order to allow a public comment period, since we do have the public hearing, if there's someone
Oh,
who wants
okay,
to
good thinking.
address
I was
more
going to
on
ask that next, but before we vote, that's a good idea. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Okay. Call it.
Who moved?
I did.
Second?
Second was trustee Dobb.
Dobb, Mr. Dobb. Okay. Dobb.
Yes.
Herman. Yes. Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Did it? We have no presentation of special reports. Is there anyone in the audience, again, who has something they'd like to bring to the attention of the Board of Trustees? We are going to approve the consent agenda in a few minutes. Is there anything in the consent agenda that anyone in the audience would like pulled and discussed? Is there anything in the consent agenda that any of the trustees would like to pull or discuss? We're going to approve the minutes and the bills. Could I have a motion?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second. Mr. Dobb again.
Newhouse.
Was it? Okay.
Okay. Vote.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
I have a couple of items tonight. One is ordinance 1415. It's an ordinance that essentially would allow the sale of wine and beer outdoors. You've all received a copy of this. Could I have a motion to get it on the table?
So moved, Your Honor.
I have a
Second.
second. Second by Belsley. Mr. Newhouse moved.
Yes.
Any discussion on this ordinance?
What is this different than the beer gardens we have now? What's in here different?
I will refer to the attorney in a minute, but basically it doesn't require a fence. It actually, the way it's written right now, it only applies to people with beer and wine, which means it only applies to wines and more at this time. And it would allow them to sell wine at tables out front without a fence around it.
So you have to be able to sell wine? Is that the,
Wine and beer, but not liquor.
not liquor? Okay. I'm just thinking through it. Okay.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, well, thank you. I favor the ordinance. I think we're it's probably overdue. Creates a limited environment where people could enjoy sidewalk dining, and I understand that. It's limited to A3 licenses, and I don't know how many of those we've got. You mentioned wines and more. I wonder if somebody, that there could be potentially others. What if Firehouse Pizza would like to do this? They're in basically the same physical situation. So while I intend to vote for it, I wonder if it ought to either be amended, or perhaps trustees would be willing at some later date to consider some other variants, because there are going to be property owners at some point that say, hey, I've got a restaurant, I'm going to be able to serve wine and beer outdoors, I can have a pavilion here, it's contiguous to my property, or whatever. So I think that it may be, it makes a very conservative start, and I'm fine with that, but I think that at some point, if we don't see it accommodating it now, that at some point, we need to be able to accommodate maybe some variants of this. As it stands right now, I would think that somebody like Firehouse Pizza could go ahead and do it. They serve beer, they don't serve hard liquor that I know of. I don't know what license they hold, maybe it's not an A3, but they're basically in the exact same physical condition as Wines and More, and only a few, less than 100 feet apart probably. So I think it's a good ordinance. I just think we need to consider whether or not there's some opportunities for other people to, not, let me put it another way, we don't want to limit other people's opportunities that might be legitimate.
When I think you definitely want those that serve food. So what is A3? Is that,
That's not doesn't necessarily require food, I don't think.
It's just wine, it's a license to serve wine and beer on or off the premises. It doesn't necessarily have a food implication, but a food serving place could have an A3 license and want to serve food.
As long as they don't serve hard
liquor.
Hard liquor, okay.
Yeah, the impetus for this was that we recently changed our zoning laws downtown
No.
to create multiple zoning, so you can have some very nice apartments upstairs and shops and restaurants downstairs. And it just seemed to add to the ambiance and the sophistication that we're going for, to be able to go downstairs and have a glass of wine in a summer evening while you're having a bite to eat, just seemed to be appropriate and a bit overdue.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned having a bite to eat, but this is really not tied to,
No.
I know one of those sample ordinances that we looked at specifically had like a sidewalk cafe designation. This really is not tied to,
Food. No,
Food
at
at
this
this
point it isn't.
and another question. If you have an say you have, like, say, the people who have like a full liquor license for both, for all, hard liquor, et cetera, could they also apply for an A3 license, or are they like mutually exclusive? Is it A3 and only A3 that we're approving?
I would answer that because that falls within my purview. I didn't bring my code with me, and I don't have your liquor license classifications committed to memory. Generally, if they have a license, 2 points. One, with this ordinance, you're creating one available Class I license, which would be to allow this outdoor seating area. So if that license is filled in the future, someone else wants to get another license, you would have to amend your code to allow an available
Right.
license to be there for.
Right.
Generally, and I don't know this for certain with your code, if they have a license that allows them full service of wine, beer, and hard liquor, usually it's exclusive of itself that someone would want an A3 that would allow them only beer and wine. So by having one that gives them full service of beer, alcohol, and wine, usually a code would not allow them to also apply for and receive an A3 because there'd be no reason for them to obtain that. Also, my understanding is you don't have any available A3 licenses now, so if somebody new wanted that license, you would again have to amend your code to make one available to them. So, long way around, I'm not directly certain the answer to your question. I'm sorry I didn't bring my code, but that's,
Well, I guess my concern would be that if someone wanted to, if they had a full liquor license and they wanted to have sidewalk seating, if they would or could go by and purchase an A3 license also, and then be out on the sidewalk with their beer and wine, even though the establishment is full alcohol.
my suggestion to the board would be, I would recommend the board against opening up an A3 license in that instance. So you would have to take an action for there to be an A3 license for them to even apply for. And
Oh, okay.
so if they were to
I
make
see.
that request, I'd want some explanation why you as a board would give them an A3 since they already have a license, letting
I
them do
understand,
that.
okay.
So they would have to go through 2 steps through you as a board where you'd have to take special action before they'd reach the point they could apply for the Class I. So I would tell you, as a general matter, there are protections in place for you to guard against that.
Thank you for explaining that the second time, so I understood.
To some extent, in response to Trustee Newhouse, I talked to Tom Davies, and we didn't want this to be an open,
Right.
to open the gates, as you will. We wanted to go very slowly and very carefully. And so anybody else who wants to take advantage of this is going to have to come before us and be considered, each one on its own merits.
And this, the seating will not be in the public right-of-way, it will be on the part of the sidewalk that is not in the public right-of-way, or how does that, is that how it, my understanding, just that one little area there that would just accommodate a couple people?
The My interpretation of the ordinance is that it would allow seating in right-of-way, but they are providing you a certificate of insurance to ensure the village against any loss that might be occasioned by their use.
As a practical matter, in this particular location,
Yes, okay.
the first several feet of sidewalk from the building is private property. And I think Mr. Spangler can maybe confirm the dimensions, but the whole of the sidewalk is not public property. So as a practical matter, the tables and chairs would likely be on private property. But as I read the ordinance, the real restriction is in not impeding sidewalk traffic, and therefore the issue of private property versus public property seems to me to be kind of moot. And so as long as there's a satisfactory restriction and responsibility on the serving organization, this is done lots of places, I don't have a problem with it.
But where in here does it say wine and beer only? No.
A3,
That's
the
A3.
definition of A3.
Okay.
Anything over here? Mr. Belsley, Mr. Dodd, questions? Ms. Herman, anything else?
No.
Call the question.
Herman,
Yes.
Kaufman,
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley,
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Next, I'd like to talk about appointments to the Village Planning Commission. Todd Ryan has served with distinction for some time, but his business interests, which include properties in Europe and Asia, India in particular, are demanding a lot of his time. So I'm going to ask the board to approve a new appointment of a lady named Kathy Pagel. Kathy's a registered professional civil engineer. She has an MBA. She's a supervisor at Ameren for some time now. She has been head of plant engineering. She's headed environmental affairs. She's been responsible for gas and electric construction. She ran the real estate department for Silco for a while. She came to Morton in 1983 and moved into Thornridge, and she's now treasurer of the Villas at Thornridge Housing Association. She's treasurer of the Association of Energy Engineers. She's been on the board of the Salvation Army, on the board of the Girl Scouts, on the board of the AAIM Employers Association, and she is willing and anxious to serve. Could I have a motion to approve
So
her?
moved, Ronald.
Second?
Kaufman, second by Billson. Any questions about Ms. Pagel? Call it, please.
Kaufman,
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley,
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
I would like to reappoint Phil Zobrist. No need to go into Phil's background. He's been in this position for a long time, and he's well-known. Could I have a motion to appoint Phil?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Herman. Kaufman moved. Any discussion about Phil? Call it, please.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Secondly, there's Craig Smock. We want to make sure that we have the school district represented, and he's done a great job. I'd like to reappoint Craig. Could I have a motion to do
So
so?
moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Mr. Newhouse, second by Mr. Kaufman. Discussion about Craig. Call it.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
To bring the Village Zoning Board of Appeals up to date, I'd like to reappoint Bill Opperly. Again, everyone knows Bill. He's been on the board, and I would like a motion.
So
So
moved.
Mr.
Second.
Newhouse, second by Mr. Kaufman. Discussion on Mr. Opperly. Call the vote, please.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
And I'd also like to reappoint David Betteridge, again, a veteran who's been on there a long time and is a good zoning member. Motion by Mr. Newhouse, second by
Or,
Mr. Kaufman. Call it, please.
Herman.
yes.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Does the village clerk have anything tonight?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Village administrator, do you have some other things for us?
I do. The first item, I just wanted to call your attention. I had placed a memo in your packet regarding a bad debt or a debt that we needed to write off. So in March of 2009, Morton Metalcraft filed for bankruptcy. It was a reorganization bankruptcy. And at that time, they owed us $200,525. These bills were for reading from January through March. They were a couple months behind. We were in the delinquency process with them, so had they not paid, we usually would shut them off, etc. But before we could do that process, we received the bankruptcy paperwork, so they were protected. So all of those bills basically went in, and we became one of their debtors. And so I realize that the amount is high. Those were the coldest months, January and February. I know a couple of board members have asked why it was so high. It was just a couple of months, just the bad timing. It has been 5 years now, and we are fairly certain we won't be collecting this debt. So we would like to write it off, get it off the village's books. And I just wanted to let you know that that's what we plan to do in this fiscal year. So, any questions?
If anyone has anything they'd like to say about that, this would be a good time.
I suppose it's worth noting, Your Honor, it's an unfortunate outcome, but Morton residents need to recognize that in bankruptcy cases, this is often how it works. Realistically speaking, there's an order to claimants, and in some cases, there's just nothing left to claim, and that appears to be the case here. So the board, if the board agrees, we do it reluctantly. But
Yeah, if people wonder why it's taken so long, I think what Trustee Newhouse said explains it. You hope that there'll be some value that they extract from this thing when they shut it down, and you wait patiently to hope you'll get maybe half of your money or something. In this case, there wasn't much.
Right. And it's services rendered, so we've already given them that. We don't have, I think we probably had, for one of the buildings that is rented, we had a $150 deposit. So there's that one. The second item on my list is I am asking approval tonight to transfer $612,000 from the general fund and $28,000 from the stormwater depreciation fund to the capital projects fund.
So moved.
Motion by Kaufman, second by Belsley. Any questions or discussion? Call the question.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
And that's all tonight, Your Honor.
Chief of Police.
First, I'd like to inform the board that this weekend is the barbecue throwdown, Friday and Saturday. We've been approached again by the organizers requesting the same street closures in the past, and we have granted that. That'll be First Avenue from Jefferson to Penn Street, and both East and Washington and East Adams from Main Street over to 2nd Avenue. They'll actually start closing down those roads Thursday evening, Thursday the 24th at about 6 p.m. So I want to inform the board of that. Next, I'd ask the board for approval of ordinance number 14-17. It's amending Title 6, Chapter 11, Section 3 of the Morton Municipal Code, reference vicious dog. We did this about 3 years ago, added this ordinance in here. Since then, there's been some modification on the state's end regarding their statute. Corporate counsel, Mr. Davies, has recommended that the board go verbatim with the state statute on that, and that's what this modification is, and it's giving the times and when these vicious dogs are able to be taken from their enclosure and how that's to be done.
Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Belsley, second by Mr. Dobb. Any questions? Call it, please.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Kaufman.
Yes.
Corporate Counsel. The Director of Fire and Emergency Services couldn't be with us tonight, so we will move to the Director of Public Works.
I have two items tonight, Your Honor. First is ordinance number 14-16. This is an ordinance amending Title 9, Chapter 6, Section 2 of the Morton Municipal Code in reference to no parking provisions. And just to briefly summarize, I'm asking for approval of the following parking ordinance revisions, and I'll just briefly go through them. The first one, probably the biggest one, is we're asking for no parking along the north side of East Washington Street. That'd be from 4th Street to 7th Street. It'd be the extension of the section of Washington between 1st and 4th. I did send letters out to all the residents on this, and this has been a ongoing discussion for, well, since we reconstructed that street last summer. Basically, the width isn't our standard width street and doesn't allow for two-way traffic when parking on both sides. So there's concerns for emergency service vehicles, and I've had several complaints from the residents. So I've received no comments from the letters, so I think this is a good one to move forward with. Second one is East Jefferson Street. This will eliminate 4 parking spaces, 3 on the south side, 1 on the north. This is directly in front of Jefferson School. I've coordinated this with Dr. Hall, and all these I've worked with Chief Hilliard on, but coordinated this one with Dr. Hall and the principal of Jefferson. Everyone's in concurrence that this will improve sight distance and ultimately safety in this area. The third one is at South Nebraska and Crestwood Street. This is at Lincoln School. There's a crosswalk in this area. There's a sight distance concern and ultimately safety here too. This will restrict parking during school days, 100 foot in each direction on all 3 legs. And this was discussed with the principal and Dr. Hall too. The fourth one is West Jefferson Street. This is right at our water treatment plant and directly across from Eli's. We'd like to eliminate 1 parking space. Again, sight distance and safety right there. So this will definitely be an improvement in safety. And then the last one is South 4th Avenue. This one's fairly minor, but we eliminated a driveway during the construction of Washington Street, and this will actually extend and add parking on South 4th further north from Birchwood. So I'd like to ask for your approval for these.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second? Second, Tom.
Question. I live on Washington Street, and I have a concern that doing so might actually increase the amount of traffic using Washington Street. It's not necessary, shouldn't be a normal flow path for people to go 7th to Washington to 4th, but a lot of people may choose to do so if it's a less congested street. And I live on the north side. Sometimes I have my car in front there, my next door neighbor sometimes does as well. And I think it tends to slow things down. Would an alternative possibly be, I'm thinking plowing is when you'd have the biggest issues. And maybe to make that a no parking during snow events type situation. Worst case, the area between 4th and 5th is really where it's very difficult to make that turn. It's already in a bleak angle that you have to make to go in there. Sure. And that if it was just no parking from 4th to 5th, I think that would make it much easier for vehicles to make the turn onto Washington Street that need to, and then maybe restricted during snow.
Would you mind giving your name and address, so otherwise the clerk's going to have a hard time writing about you?
William Wagner, 611 East Washington.
Thank you.
In response to that, I mean, I understand the concerns. Obviously, we don't want to restrict parking in front of somebody's home. But like I said, our standard street is 32 feet face to face. That allows you enough room for parking on both sides. In this case, it's 24 foot. It's the same section from 1st to 4th. And I've witnessed it. I believe Roger Spangler has, and Trustee Belsley's been involved with this too, that we've witnessed occasions at night where you go through there and it's tough to even fit 1 vehicle through there, especially at nights when there's been parties and stuff. Really came to a head that, with emergency vehicles, there's a long stretch there where it really is a safety concern. I know we do close a long stretch of that during the festival. My concern, like I said, is when we get these narrow streets that, 24 foot is just, it's a tough one to allow parking on both sides. If Chief Hilliard would like to speak on it.
I agree. We do shut this down when we get the high traffic volume during the festival. We've done that for several years. With the changing the repair work on East Washington, I think it's a good move. It's very similar to how we have on North Bauman Street in the 400 block, the 400 block there, where it's a narrow street. We have parking on one side. It's not just for the snow plows, but it's to allow the traffic in both directions, both the east-west travel. So it does get very congested when you have vehicles parked on both sides there. Again, it's an older area town, and the streets aren't to the width that they should be.
So plowing's definitely a concern, but I think there truly is a concern for emergency vehicles. While I understand your concern, a couple parked cars there, and if there's an issue, which we hope there never is, it's going to be very difficult to get down that street. That's the overriding concern there. And I think we'll look at other streets in the same condition, where older ones that are too narrow. That's definitely a concern that we have.
We have a motion and a second. Having heard from staff and from a concerned citizen, does anyone have any questions, comments?
I would only.
Oh, go ahead.
I would only add, as Craig has mentioned, I have been there on a number of occasions to witness the traffic flow, and I've got the same concerns that's been shared. I quite frankly, under the conditions as they exist now, it's a wonder that there hasn't been more incidents, or an incident at least, based on how narrow it is, and especially, of course, in the winter with the plowing. I guess I can appreciate your concerns, but I think based on what's shared here tonight and my own observations, I guess if I were to err, I'd rather err on the side of safety on this. And I think it's something to your concern that if we're gonna encourage traffic to change their pattern, I think that's something certainly the street department and the police department can keep an eye on and recognize or acknowledge if there is significant difference there.
I understand the concern. At the same time, I think it may be one of those unintended consequences that you'll see more flow down that street than there is currently, which I think would be unfortunate.
Trustee Herman?
I think my question has been answered. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Call a question.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb. Yes. Herman.
Yes.
Hoffman.
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
My next item is the Public Works recap for the month of June is in your packets, and that's all I have tonight, Your Honor.
Planning and zoning. All right. Trustee Belsley?
Yes, have one item. It's in regards to resolution number 0714, a resolution approving 2014 intergovernmental property tax abatement agreement. I shared briefly on this matter at our last meeting, and I guess I just wanted to make a few comments tonight and give a little more detail on this. This is something that's since been posted on our website and been available for public comment, I think, recently with this board packet being released, and was looking for feedback from the public and from the business community as well. But this is a matter, this policy is something that the Business Attraction Committee with the Economic Development Council, Morton EDC, has been working on for the better part of this past year. And it's something that came out of the situation that's resulted over the past couple of years with we're wanting to be aggressive and attractive to businesses considering Morton to relocate here, but also consider those businesses that are already located in Morton looking to expand and to be competitive with the surrounding communities that already have property tax abatement policies in place with their enterprise zones. And quite frankly, I think as we look at what criteria is set up and what incentives are offered, I think it's a great reflection of Morton in the sense that it's allowing the incentive to offer to businesses and yet it has a conservative flavor to it, if you will. And by that, I mean it's very common for there to be a 100% property tax abatement across the board for a 5-year term. And just as an example of this, we also offer a 5-year property tax schedule on this, but it's an ascending, descending scale. We have, for year 1 is 90% that the criteria offers, or the incentive offers. Year 2 is 70%, and then for years 3, 4, and 5, it's 50%. So it's maybe not as quite attractive as neighboring communities. It's still something very attractive and something that we want to put out there and offer to businesses looking, considering to relocate or expand in Morton. And really, if you look at the amount of activity over the last couple of years, there's been 3 projects specifically, American Tire, Morton Industries, and Monsanto, that this board, as well as other local bodies, considered for this abatement as well. And based on the criteria that we have set up in this policy now, all 3 of them would have met that criteria as well. So we really haven't strayed far from our past practices and the considerations given them, but they all would have qualified for the policy that is being proposed right now tonight. It's something, it's important for us to be competitive with our surrounding communities. We need to be in the game when it comes to businesses looking to expand or relocate, and we want to send that message here with this policy. Where it's at to date is this has been communicated, the committee has communicated the policy and the intent of this with other local governing bodies, and it's at various stages right now of approval or consideration for approval by those bodies. And what I'm looking for is that we should know a little more in the next couple of weeks, actually in the next month, probably with other meetings and final review and discussion and a vote on this, where we stand with those other governing bodies. And so with that, and my understanding is there's no pending projects right now waiting for this policy to take place, I'd like to make a motion that this be a first reading and allow that to run its course for those full consideration by their other local bodies, and as well as any input or feedback from the public, and to table this to the next meeting for a final vote.
Before there's a second, I would point out it's not necessary to have this a first reading. If you wanted to, you could move for a vote tonight.
I've discussed this briefly with Trustee Newhouse, and I guess if I understand there's no projects pending right now, I don't see any harm in letting it be tabled to another meeting.
Just wanted everyone to know.
Sure.
I think, Your Honor, that, the school board has approved it unanimously. I think we are in position with the other taxing bodies where there's a good understanding. Committee members or EDC members have called on those organizations. The only one that I think may still have some consideration of the township. I discussed this earlier with Trustee Belsley. I don't know that there's any great urgency to get this done. From a personal standpoint, I'd be perfectly comfortable voting for it tonight. But I don't have any strong opposition if we want to have a second reading. I think that, though, given the status with the various other organizations, there are no bad consequences of proceeding if trustees should care to do that.
Well, we have a motion for a first reading. Do I have a second for the first reading?
I just have a comment. Would you like to vote on it, subject to all the other tax bodies approving it? Do they need the confidence that we're going to support it?
Yes.
Well, I mean, we could approve it tonight, subject to all the other taxing bodies signing on, so that they knew we were going to support it, whatever you two feel.
That troubles me a little bit in that, we're the body that's elected to pass on this, and we're going to let someone else decide whether or not we're going to do this.
Well, I think it's failed if not everybody signs on.
Well,
Not
basically,
really.
we've been told the only organization, I don't want to take anybody for granted,
Right.
but the only organization right now where I think there have been remaining questions, and those may be resolved, have been with the township. And what we've mostly heard is if the village board and the school board approve it, then, and we don't have any other problems, then we're on board. And the county, ICC, and the library board have already given us, I think, guidance along those lines. So again, I'm not absolutely opposed to having a second reading, but I am also perfectly comfortable with proceeding. Frankly, that would probably be given left to me, that would probably be my first choice. But I'm willing to go either way. But I think we ought to get it done.
Well, we've got a motion. We need a second to make this a first reading. We need it. Do I hear a second? Would I take that to mean that everybody'd like to vote on this tonight? Is that okay?
I can change my motion.
Trustee Belsley and Trustee Newhouse have been at the forefront of this, and so they know best what to do. Whatever you two guys want to do works for me.
I can modify that motion
Right.
to.
The motion to
ask for
pass,
approval
motion
to
to-
pass it tonight.
Any discussion? I'll have to make a couple of comments. One is, I think you need to have something like this because when corporations are looking for a place to light, if they hear that a town is filled with complications, that they're going to have to go through board after board, hearing after hearing, very often they'll just move on to another town. That's a lot of trouble to go through. The second thing I was questioned a couple of times about was, gosh, is this fair to existing businesses? And the fact is, if any existing business meets this criteria, they can have every single benefit that's in the proposal. So indeed, it is fair to existing businesses. Having said that, I'll ask if there are any other comments or questions. If not, call the question, please.
Okay. Herman,
Yes.
Kaufman,
Yes.
Newhouse.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Dobb.
Yes.
Trustee Dobb.
Nothing tonight.
Trustee Hare. He's not here. Trustee Herman.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Trustee Kaufman.
Nothing tonight.
Trustee Newhouse.
Two items, Your Honor. One is informational. The first item is the county zoning case before you. I think everybody got this handout on your desk. This has to do with approval of the placement of a mobile home on property for a retired parent to reside on the same property as the rest of the family. And it is in A1 Agricultural Preservation District, which exists for the county only. It does not exist. We have no such zoning in the village of Morton. Nevertheless, it's inside our mile-and-a-half zoning, and we would not permit such an arrangement. So I think the direction, and Mr. Spangler and I have discussed this, but the direction we would recommend would be to the county that they recognize that not need approval with Morton zoning, but again, we don't have the same zoning, so they will have to make a decision. But they need to be advised that from our standpoint, that would be an unacceptable arrangement within our zoning. So, do we need a resolution on that since we're sending a letter, or just guidance?
Do we want to mention anything about when that use ceases to be needed, that it goes
Yes.
away?
Thank you. That was, Mr. Spangler had recommended earlier that if the county is to approve it, we would recommend that it be done with some kind of expiration date so that at some point that condition can no longer exist.
I think a consensus vote would be fine. Anyone opposed to this? Everyone pretty much in favor?
Yes.
I think we're set. Just go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Before we entertain a motion to adjourn,
Your Honor, I had one more item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One informational item. I had informed everyone before we left for Switzerland that I would report on our expedition. And you'll see I am wearing my souvenir T-shirt here from top of the roof. And translated another way, that means when they lose your luggage, you have to make do with what you can find. So that's the reason for the display. But we, Mortonites should know that we had a very successful trip overall. The people who joined us were very happy with the outcome. You know, neighbors all knew one another. Great time. We also had some very successful business visits. So one company, PureTech, of course, is already an investor in Morton. Ms. Eulig and I did meet with the City of Vevey officials, and we did discuss a sister city relationship, as I had reported earlier that we would do. We had a very constructive conversation with one of their officials, and had previous email discussion with another official. They were very kind. and we had a very good discussion, but in the end, we were informed that because Vevey has two other sister city relationships in close proximity, European cities, that they feel have not developed the way they had expected. They are reluctant to add a third one in particular, an ocean away. So they have very politely and respectfully declined to pursue it at this time. And we thank them for their kind consideration. They were great. It's a wonderful city, beautiful place. Anybody ever gets a chance to go should go. We did have a successful meeting with Nestle officials, Vice President for North America, and people responsible for Morton operations. So it was a very worthwhile visit, but we will not have a sister city relationship with
Do you think
Vevey.
the door is open for future contact?
I think maybe there's some potential in the future, but the sense we got, and very clear direction even at the outset, was they really were not very happy. The issue with sister cities is their sustainability. You've got to be doing something, and then somebody's got to pay for it. If high school bands are going to exchange visits, then somebody's got to pay for the high school bands. And if the arts group or whatever is going to visit, then there has to be some arrangement for that. And over time, they're hard to manage. And other people who have been involved with sister cities have told me this. I think Peoria's relationship with Friedrichshafen in Germany from time to time has been stretched, and not because of bad relations, but simply because it's hard to keep up the momentum. And the officials in Vevey really feel at this point that there's not an opportunity. So and when you talk about the future, I would think that it would be longer than the near-term future. And in the meantime, we will keep our eyes open for other opportunities where maybe there is a very good fit with Morton, and we'd say, yeah, there's a good business or cultural reason for this to take place, and it's a good fit, and we'll recommend it.
Thank you. Again, before we adjourn, I'd like to call on the chief. I think he has a presentation for us.
Well, I was actually going to do this at the conclusion of the meeting for the board, but our canine handler just went out, and he's going to do some little demonstration with our dog.
Yeah, so don't rush off. We're going to have a demonstration on how the canine works.
Yeah, he's going to do a little things for you and do a little talk and explain to you some of the things that our canine can do. So,
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Patrick. All in favor? Or do we have to call?
Another one of my.
All in favor of adjourning?